Before we get into the story, leave a comment and let us know what city you're watching from. And don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. The wedding reception glittered like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, their light catching on champagne flutes and diamond earrings. White roses climbed every column, their petals so perfect they looked painted. The band played something slow and romantic, violins weaving through laughter and clinking glasses. Madison Cole sat at a table near the dance floor, nursing her third glass of champagne and trying not to look as lonely as she felt. Her emerald dress clung to her curves, the kind of dress that demanded confidence she didn't quite possess tonight. She'd come alone to her cousin's wedding, a decision she was now regretting with every passing minute. Around her, couples swayed on the dance floor, their happiness almost aggressive in its brightness. Madison had always been the single friend, the career-focused one, the woman who prioritized ambition over romance. At 28, she ran a small graphic design studio, worked 70-hour weeks, and told herself she was perfectly content. But tonight, surrounded by all this love, she felt the lie like a stone in her chest. The champagne was making everything softer around the edges, blurring the sharp loneliness into something almost bearable. She reached for her glass again, fingers trembling slightly, when a voice interrupted her thoughts. "You look like you could use some company." Madison glanced up, ready to politely decline, but the words died on her lips. The man standing beside her table was stunning. Tall, probably 6'3", with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on magazine covers. His tuxedo fit him like it had been tailored by someone who understood the architecture of the male body. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Deep brown, almost black, with something unreadable flickering in their depths. "I'm fine, actually," Madison heard herself say, though her voice sounded uncertain even to her own ears. He smiled, just a slight curve of his mouth. "You're a terrible liar. Mind if I sit?" Before she could answer, he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Madison's cheeks flushed, whether from the champagne or his proximity, she couldn't tell. "I'm Ethan," he said, extending his hand. "Ethan Sinclair." "Madison," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was warm, firm, and lasted just a second longer than necessary. "And you are?" "The groom's brother." Madison's eyes widened. She'd heard about Ethan Sinclair. Everyone had. While his younger brother James had gone into medicine, becoming the beloved family doctor, Ethan had taken a different path. He'd built a tech empire from nothing, turning a college startup into a billion-dollar corporation before he turned 30. The media called him ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. He was also notoriously private, rarely photographed, never interviewed. And now he was sitting across from her, looking at her like she was the only person in the room. "I didn't see you during the ceremony," Madison said, trying to steady her voice. "I was running late. Business call from Tokyo." He said it casually, like international business calls were as common as ordering coffee. "I managed to slip in before the vows, but I've been hiding in the back ever since." "Why hide? It's your brother's wedding." Ethan's expression shifted, something darker crossing his features. "Let's just say I'm not particularly fond of weddings. Too much sentiment, not enough substance." Madison raised an eyebrow. "That's cynical, even for a billionaire CEO. You know who I am." It wasn't a question. "Hard not to. You're kind of famous for being famous." He laughed, a real laugh that transformed his face from handsome to devastating. "I like you already. Most people either fawn or fear. You're doing neither." "Should I be afraid?" Madison asked, surprised by her own boldness. The champagne was definitely working. "Probably," Ethan said, his voice dropping lower. "I'm told I'm quite terrifying in board meetings." "Good thing this isn't a board meeting." Their eyes locked, and Madison felt something electric pass between them. The air seemed to thicken, the noise of the reception fading into background static. She should look away. She knew she should, but she couldn't. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody. "So, Madison, who runs a graphic design studio and comes to weddings alone, what brings you to my brother's fairy tale?" "How did you—" "I asked around. I wanted to know who the beautiful woman in green was before I approached." Madison's heart stuttered. Beautiful? When was the last time someone had called her beautiful? "My cousin is the bride," she said, trying to focus. "Jessica and I grew up together. We were inseparable until college. And now? Now she's marrying a doctor, and I'm building brands for tech startups. Life happens." "You sound regretful." Madison shrugged, taking another sip of champagne. "Maybe a little. Everyone seems to be moving forward with their lives, getting married, having kids. Sometimes I wonder if I'm missing something." "You're not," Ethan said with surprising firmness. "You're building something that matters. That's more than most people can say." Spoken like someone who's never wanted a family. The words came out sharper than she intended, but Ethan didn't flinch. "I didn't say I never wanted it. I said weddings are too sentimental. There's a difference." Before Madison could respond, the band shifted into a waltz. Couples flooded the dance floor, including Jessica and James, spinning in the center like something from an old movie. Ethan stood abruptly, extending his hand. "Dance with me." "What?" "Dance with me," he repeated, "before you overthink it and say no." Madison stared at his hand, her mind racing. This was insane. She barely knew this man. He was her cousin's new brother-in-law, a billionaire, completely out of her league. But the champagne hummed in her veins, and his eyes held a challenge she couldn't resist. She placed her hand in his. The moment they stepped onto the dance floor, Ethan pulled her close, one hand settling on her waist, the other clasping hers. They moved together seamlessly, as if they'd been dancing for years instead of seconds. Madison's heart pounded against her ribs, so loud she was certain Ethan could hear it. His hand on her waist felt like a brand, warm even through the fabric of her dress. They moved across the floor in perfect synchronization, his lead so confident she didn't have to think, just follow. "You're a good dancer," Madison said, needing to break the silence before it swallowed her whole. "I had lessons as a kid. My mother insisted all her children learn the waltz." Ethan's voice was close to her ear, sending shivers down her spine. "She said it taught discipline and grace." "Did it work?" "I learned discipline in other ways. Grace is still debatable." Madison laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she'd laughed like this, free and genuine? Ethan pulled her slightly closer, and she could feel the solid warmth of his chest against hers. "What about you?" he asked. "Did you have dancing lessons?" "YouTube videos the night before my senior prom," Madison admitted. "I stepped on my date's feet so many times he asked someone else to dance halfway through the night." "His loss," Ethan said simply. The song shifted into something slower, more intimate. Around them, couples drew together, heads resting on shoulders, hands intertwined. Ethan's thumb traced a small circle on Madison's lower back, a gesture so subtle she almost missed it. Almost. "Can I tell you something?" Ethan asked, his voice different now, quieter, almost vulnerable. "Sure. I've been watching you all evening, even before I came over." Madison pulled back slightly to look at his face. "Why?" "Because you looked like the only real person in the room. Everyone else is performing, playing their roles. The happy guests, The perfect family. But you were just sitting there, being honest about your loneliness. It was refreshing. Madison's throat tightened. I wasn't trying to be refreshing. I was just sad. I know. That's what made it real. Ethan's eyes searched hers. Do you know what it's like to be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone? Yes, Madison whispered. Every single day. Something shifted between them then, an understanding that went beyond words. The music swelled, violins crying out in bittersweet harmony, and Madison realized she was dangerously close to falling for a man she'd known for less than an hour. When the song ended, Ethan didn't let go immediately. They stood there, still swaying slightly, until someone bumped into them and broke the spell. I need some air, Madison said suddenly, stepping back. It's too hot in here. I'll come with you. No, I just need a minute alone. She didn't wait for his response, just turned and walked quickly toward the terrace doors, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Outside, the night air hit her like a splash of cold water. Madison gripped the stone railing, breathing deeply, trying to clear her head. What was she doing? She didn't believe in instant connections or love at first sight. She was practical, logical, grounded. But everything about tonight felt like stepping into someone else's life. Running away already? Ethan's voice came from behind her. Madison didn't turn around. I thought I said I needed to be alone. And I thought I'd ignore that. He came to stand beside her, close but not touching. Madison, look at me. She did, reluctantly. In the moonlight, he looked different, softer somehow. The hard edges of the CEO were smoothed away, leaving just a man. I'm drunk, Madison said. That's the only explanation for why I'm acting like this. You've had 3 glasses of champagne over 2 hours. You're not drunk. You're scared. Of what? Of this. Ethan gestured between them, of feeling something real with a stranger. Madison wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. He was right. She was terrified. Not of him, but of the way he made her feel, reckless and brave and alive. I don't do this, she said quietly. I don't meet men at weddings and dance with them and feel like the world has tilted on its axis. I'm boring. I work too much. I go home to a cat named Fitzgerald and watch documentaries for fun. Ethan smiled. Fitzgerald? Let me guess. Named after F. Scott? Obviously. Then you're not boring. You're a woman who names her cat after literary giants and runs her own business. That's the opposite of boring. You don't know me. Not yet, Ethan agreed, but I'd like to. Madison's breath caught. Ethan, I know this is crazy. I know we just met. But I haven't felt this interested in anyone in years, maybe ever. So I'm asking, can I see you again? Not as the groom's brother and the bride's cousin. Just as Ethan and Madison. Madison's mind screamed at her to say no, to protect herself, to be smart. But her heart, that traitorous organ, was already saying yes. One date, she heard herself say. Just one, and then we'll see. Ethan's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. One date, I can work with that. He pulled out his phone. Give me your number. Madison recited it, watching as he typed it in. A second later, her phone buzzed in her purse. Now you have mine, Ethan said, in case you need to cancel or change your mind or just want to talk. I won't change my mind. The words were out before she could stop them, but Madison realized they were true. Whatever this was, she wanted to see where it led. They stood there on the terrace, the music drifting out from the reception, the city lights glittering in the distance. Ethan reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind Madison's ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. You're dangerous, Madison Cole, he said softly. Why? Because you make me want things I've convinced myself I don't need. Before Madison could respond, voices erupted from inside. They turned to see Jessica and James cutting the cake, surrounded by cheering guests. "We should go back," Madison said reluctantly. Ethan nodded, but as they walked toward the doors, he caught her hand, intertwining their fingers. It was such a simple gesture, but it made Madison's heart race all over again. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. Madison found herself constantly aware of Ethan's presence, even when they weren't standing together. She'd catch him watching her from across the room, his gaze intense and unwavering, and every time their eyes met, electricity sparked between them. When it was finally time to leave, Ethan walked her to her car. The parking lot was mostly empty now, the party winding down inside. Madison's silver Honda looked shabby next to the line of luxury vehicles, but she refused to be embarrassed. "This is me," she said, gesturing to her car. Ethan looked at it, then at her. His expression unreadable. "You're sure you're okay to drive?" "I'm fine. The champagne wore off hours ago." She unlocked the door, but didn't open it yet. "Thank you for tonight, for making it less lonely. The pleasure was entirely mine." Ethan stepped closer, and Madison's breath hitched. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, and she wasn't sure if she wanted him to, or was terrified he would. But he simply lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "We'll plan that date." Madison nodded, not trusting her voice. She slid into her car, and Ethan closed the door for her, stepping back as she started the engine. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him still standing there, watching her leave. The drive home should have given Madison time to process everything, but her mind was too chaotic. She kept replaying moments, his hand on her waist, the way he'd looked at her in the moonlight, the promise of a date hanging between them like something fragile and precious. By the time she reached her apartment, it was past midnight. Fitzgerald greeted her at the door, meowing indignantly at her late return. I know," Madison murmured, scooping up the orange tabby. "But you won't believe the night I had." She changed out of her dress, hanging it carefully in her closet, and washed off her makeup. In the bathroom mirror, she looked the same as always. Brown hair, green eyes, the small scar on her chin from a childhood bike accident. But she felt different, transformed somehow by a single evening. Madison climbed into bed. Fitzgerald curling up beside her and checked her phone one last time. There was a message from Ethan, sent just minutes ago. "I know I said I'd call tomorrow, but I couldn't wait. Are you home safe?" Madison smiled, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Yes. Fitzgerald is judging me for staying out so late." His response was immediate. "Fitzgerald sounds like a responsible cat. Tell him I approve." "He doesn't care about your approval. He only cares about his dinner schedule." "Smart cat. What about his owner? Does she care about my approval?" Madison bit her lip, her heart fluttering. She's still deciding. "Then I'll have to work harder to impress her. Good night, Madison." "Good night, Ethan." Madison set her phone down, but sleep wouldn't come. She stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears. This was dangerous territory. Men like Ethan Sinclair didn't date women like her. He lived in a world of private jets and board meetings, while she struggled to make rent some months. But the way he'd looked at her tonight, it hadn't felt like a game or a passing interest. It had felt real. The next morning, Madison woke to her alarm blaring and Fitzgerald sitting on her chest, staring at her with accusatory eyes. "Breakfast, I know," she mumbled, dragging herself out of bed. She fed the cat, made coffee, and tried to focus on work. Her design studio was a one-woman operation run from her spare bedroom, which meant her commute was approximately 20 feet. Usually, she loved the freedom, but today, the isolation felt heavy. Around noon, her phone rang. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, and Madison's stomach did a somersault. "Hello?" "Hi." His voice was warm, a little rough, like he'd been up for hours. "How are you feeling?" "Fine, a little tired." Madison tucked her legs under her on the couch. "You?" "Like I didn't sleep at all because I couldn't stop thinking about a certain graphic designer." Madison's cheeks flushed. "Ethan, I want to see you tonight. I know that's fast, but I don't see the point in waiting." "Do you?" Madison knew she should say yes. She should make him wait, play it cool. But the truth tumbled out before she could stop it. "No, I don't want to wait either." "Good. I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something comfortable." "Where are we going?" "It's a surprise." Ethan paused. "Do you trust me?" It was a loaded question, one that carried more weight than it should. But Madison answered honestly. "I'm starting to." After they hung up, Madison stared at her phone, a mix of excitement and terror coursing through her. She had 6 hours to prepare, and she had no idea what she was preparing for. She spent the afternoon working on a logo design for a client, but her mind kept wandering. What did something comfortable mean? Jeans? A dress? What kind of date required comfort? At 6:30, she finally settled on dark jeans, a soft cream sweater, and ankle boots. Casual but put together. She left her hair down in loose waves and kept her makeup natural. Fitzgerald watched her from the windowsill, his tail flicking back and forth. "Don't judge," Madison told him. "You'd do the same if you met a cat as intriguing as Ethan." The doorbell rang at exactly 7. Madison took a deep breath, checked her reflection one last time, and opened the door. Ethan stood there in jeans and a black Henley, looking more relaxed than he had in his tuxedo, but no less devastating. His eyes swept over her, appreciation clear in his gaze. "You look beautiful." "You clean up pretty well yourself," Madison said, grabbing her jacket. "So where are we going?" "You'll see." He held out his hand, and after only a moment's hesitation, Madison took it. Ethan's car was everything Madison expected, and more. A sleek black Aston Martin that purred like a satisfied cat when he started the engine. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne, and Madison felt simultaneously out of place and thrilled to be there. "This is a beautiful car," she said, as they pulled away from her apartment building. "Thank you. It's one of my few indulgences." Ethan glanced at her, a small smile playing at his lips. "Most people assume I collect cars like trophies. I actually just have 2. This one for weekends, and a Tesla for work." "Only 2 cards. How modest," Madison teased. "I know. I'm practically a monk." They drove through the city, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Madison watched the buildings blur past, trying to guess their destination. When Ethan turned onto a road leading out of the city, her curiosity piqued. "Are you kidnapping me?" she asked lightly. "Would you object if I was?" "Depends on where we're going." "Fair enough." Ethan's hand rested on the gear shift, close enough to hers that their fingers almost touched. "I'm taking you to my favorite place in the world. It's about 20 minutes from here." "Your favorite place," Madison repeated. "Should I be honored?" "Yes." The simplicity of his answer made Madison smile. They lapsed into comfortable silence, the radio playing something instrumental and soothing. Madison found herself relaxing into the leather seat, watching Ethan's profile as he drove. He had the kind of face that belonged in movies, all strong lines and perfect symmetry. But it was the small imperfections that drew her, a tiny scar near his left eyebrow, the slight crook in his nose like it had been broken once, the way his jaw tightened when he was concentrating. Eventually, they turned off the main road onto a narrow dirt path. Trees closed in on either side, their branches forming a canopy overhead. Just when Madison was starting to wonder if this really was a kidnapping, they emerged into a clearing. Madison gasped. Before them stretched a lake, its surface perfectly still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. A small wooden dock extended into the water, and beyond it, the forest rose up in gentle hills. It was breathtakingly beautiful, untouched, and peaceful. "Ethan, this is incredible," Madison breathed. "My grandfather owned this land. He built that dock himself when my father was a boy." Ethan parked the car and got out, coming around to open Madison's door. "After he died, my father wanted to sell it, but I bought it instead. I come here when the world gets too loud." They walked down to the dock, their footsteps echoing on the old wood. At the end, Ethan had set up a blanket and a basket. "You planned a picnic," Madison said, surprised and touched. "I know it's not a fancy restaurant, but I thought this might be nicer, more private." Ethan looked almost nervous, a crack in his usual confidence. "Was I wrong?" "No, it's perfect." Madison sat down on the blanket, and Ethan joined her, unpacking the basket. There was French bread, cheese, grapes, chocolate, and a bottle of wine. Simple food, but clearly chosen with care. "I should confess something," Ethan said, as he poured wine into 2 glasses. "I didn't prepare this myself. My housekeeper did. I can't cook to save my life." Madison laughed. "I appreciate the honesty. For what it's worth, I'm a disaster in the kitchen, too. Fitzgerald eats better than I do most days." "Then we're well matched." Ethan handed her a glass, their fingers brushing. "2 unexpected meetings." "2 unexpected meetings," Madison echoed, clinking her glass against his. They ate and talked as the sky darkened, stars beginning to prick through the deepening blue. Madison learned that Ethan had started his company in college, that he'd dropped out in his junior year to focus on it full-time, that his father still didn't approve of his career choice. "He wanted me to join the family investment firm," Ethan explained, breaking off a piece of bread. "Follow in his footsteps, play it safe. But I wanted to build something of my own, something that mattered." "Does he ever acknowledge what you've accomplished?" "Occasionally. Usually when my net worth increases significantly." Ethan's smile was wry. "My father measures success in dollars and influence. By his standards, I've exceeded expectations. By mine, I'm still figuring it out." "What are your standards?" Madison asked softly. Ethan was quiet for a moment, staring out at the lake. "I want to build technology that helps people. Not just entertains them or makes shareholders rich. I want to look back at my life and know I did more than accumulate wealth." His vulnerability caught Madison off guard. This wasn't the ruthless CEO the media portrayed. This was a man searching for meaning, just like her. "I think you will," she said. "You're already thinking about it, which is more than most people do." "What about you?" Ethan turned to face her fully. "What are your standards?" Madison considered the question. "I want to create beautiful things. I want my work to matter, even if it's just designing a logo for a small business. And I want to feel like I'm not just existing, but actually living." "Are you? Living, I mean?" It was such a direct question, and Madison found herself answering just as directly. "Not as much as I should be. I work constantly. I rarely see friends. I haven't been on a real date in over a year. I keep telling myself it's because I'm building my business. But sometimes I wonder if I'm just hiding. From what? From being disappointed, from wanting something and not getting it, from putting myself out there and being rejected." Madison hadn't meant to be so honest, but something about the darkness and the wine and Ethan's steady gaze made the truth spill out. If it helps, Ethan said quietly, I can't imagine anyone rejecting you. You barely know me. Then let me know you better. He shifted closer, his knee touching hers. Tell me something real, Madison. Something you don't usually share. Madison's heart hammered in her chest. The request felt intimate, dangerous, in a way she couldn't quite define. But Ethan's eyes held such genuine interest that she found herself wanting to answer. When I was 12, my dad left, she began, her voice soft. Just walked out one day and never came back. My mom tried to hold it together, but she fell apart instead. Started drinking, stopped working. By the time I was 16, I was taking care of both of us. Ethan's expression shifted, pain flickering across his features. Madison, it's okay. We got through it. Mom got sober when I was in college, and we're close now. But it taught me something important. The only person you can really rely on is yourself. Madison took a sip of wine, surprised at how steady her voice remained. That's why I work so hard. I never want to be dependent on someone who might leave. That's why you came to the wedding alone, Ethan said, understanding dawning. It's not that you couldn't find someone. It's that you won't let yourself need someone. Psychoanalysis on the first date. How romantic, Madison joked weakly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get heavy. Don't apologize for being honest. Ethan reached out, taking her hand. Thank you for trusting me with that. They sat in silence for a moment, Madison's hand warm in Ethan's. The night had fully descended now. Stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. The lake reflected them, doubling their beauty. My turn, Ethan said finally. Something real I don't usually share. Madison waited, sensing this was important. I have panic attacks, Ethan said, his voice carefully controlled. They started in my early 20s, right after the company took off. The pressure, the constant decisions, the knowledge that thousands of people's livelihoods depended on me, it became overwhelming. Madison squeezed his hand, encouraging him to continue. I hide them well. I've gotten good at excusing myself, finding private places to breathe through them. But they terrify me every single time. The loss of control, the feeling like I'm dying. Ethan's jaw tightened. I've never told anyone this. Not James. Not my parents. Just my therapist. And now you. Why me? Madison whispered. Because you understand what it's like to carry weight alone. And because I wanted you to know that I'm not the person the media writes about. I'm not fearless or invincible. I'm just a man trying his best not to fall apart. Madison shifted closer until their shoulders touched. You're not going to fall apart. And even if you did, I'd help you put the pieces back together. Ethan turned to look at her, his eyes intense in the starlight. You mean that? Yes. The word was barely a breath between them. And then, without planning it, without thinking about consequences or complications, Madison leaned in and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like they were both testing the waters. But then Ethan's hand came up to cup her face, and the kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and consuming. Madison had been kissed before, but never like this. Never with this intensity, this feeling of everything else falling away until only they existed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I'm in trouble, he murmured. Why? Because one date isn't going to be enough, not even close. Madison smiled, her heart soaring. Good thing I'm free tomorrow then. They stayed at the lake until nearly midnight, talking and kissing and existing in their own private world. By the time Ethan drove Madison home, she felt like she'd known him for years instead of 2 days. At her apartment door, Ethan walked her up, his hand never leaving hers. Can I see you tomorrow? He asked. You already know the answer. Say it anyway. I like hearing your voice, Madison laughed. Yes, Ethan, you can see me tomorrow. And the day after that? Probably. Probably, he repeated, mock offense in his tone. I'll have to work harder then. He kissed her again. Slower this time, sweeter. When he pulled away, Madison felt dizzy. Good night, Madison. Good night. She slipped inside her apartment. Leaning against the closed door, with a ridiculous smile on her face, Fitzgerald appeared, meowing questioningly. I know, Madison told the cat. I'm acting like a teenager. But Fitz, I really like him. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of dates and phone calls and stolen moments. Ethan took Madison to art galleries and hole-in-the-wall restaurants, to midnight movie screenings and sunrise hikes. They talked about everything, their childhoods and dreams, fears and hopes. Madison met Ethan's brother James and his new wife Jessica, who were delighted to see them together. I knew you two would hit it off, Jessica said, hugging Madison at a Sunday brunch. The moment I saw you at the wedding, I thought, she'd be perfect for Ethan. You didn't even know I'd meet him, Madison protested. But I'd hoped. And look at you now. Glowing and happy. It's perfect. Perfect. The word echoed in Madison's mind as she watched Ethan across the table, laughing at something James said. It did feel perfect. Too perfect. Which was exactly what scared her. Because in Madison's experience, perfect things didn't last. They always crumbled, revealing the cracks underneath. And sure enough, the cracks began to show. It started small. Ethan canceling dinner because of an emergency board meeting. Madison working late on a big project and missing their coffee date. These things were normal, understandable. But then the cancellations became more frequent. Ethan would text at the last minute, apologizing but offering no alternatives. Madison would call and get his voicemail, her messages going unreturned for hours. He's busy, she told herself. He runs a billion-dollar company. This is normal. But it didn't feel normal. It felt like withdrawal, like he was pulling away. The breaking point came on a Friday night. Ethan had promised to take Madison to a charity gala, his first public event since they'd started dating. She'd bought a new dress, deep blue silk that hugged her curves and made her feel beautiful. She'd spent hours getting ready, her hair styled in elegant waves, her makeup perfect. The car was supposed to pick her up at 7. By 7:30, Madison was pacing her apartment, checking her phone obsessively. No messages, no calls. At 8, she finally texted Ethan. Is everything okay? The car hasn't arrived. No response. 8:30. 9. By 9:30, Madison had changed out of her dress, washed off her makeup, and was sitting on her couch in sweats, Fitzgerald curled in her lap. She felt humiliated and stupid. How had she let herself believe this was real? Men like Ethan didn't end up with women like her. She'd been a distraction, nothing more. At 10:15, her phone finally rang. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, and Madison debated not answering, but curiosity and hurt won out. Hello? Her voice was cold, flat. Madison, I'm so sorry. Ethan sounded wrecked, exhausted. There was a crisis at work. Our entire East Coast network went down. I've been dealing with it for the past 6 hours. You couldn't text me? I should have. You're right. I just got so caught up in fixing it that I lost track of time. Madison wanted to believe him, but the hurt was too fresh, too raw. This keeps happening, Ethan. You disappear, you cancel, you go silent. I'm starting to feel like I'm dating a ghost. I know. I'm handling this all wrong. He sighed, the sound heavy with frustration. Can we talk? In person? It's after 10. I don't care. I'll come to you right now if you'll let me. Part of Madison wanted to say no, to protect herself from more disappointment. But a bigger part needed to see him, to have this conversation face to face. Fine. Come over. 30 minutes later, Ethan arrived. He looked terrible, his shirt wrinkled, his hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw Madison, his entire face softened with relief. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, stepping inside. Madison crossed her arms, maintaining distance. "You said we needed to talk." "So talk." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. A gesture Madison had learned meant he was stressed. "I've been pulling away. I know I have. And it's not because I don't care about you. It's because I care too much." "That doesn't make sense." "It does if you're me." Ethan started pacing, unable to stand still. "Madison, I told you about my panic attacks. What I didn't tell you is that they've gotten worse since we started dating." Madison's anger faltered. "Worse? Why?" "Because you scare me," Ethan said bluntly. "You make me feel things I've never felt before. You make me want a life outside of work, a real relationship, maybe even a future. And that terrifies me because what if I fail? What if I can't be what you need?" "So your solution is to push me away before you fail?" Madison's voice rose. "That's not fair, Ethan. You don't get to decide for both of us." "I know. You're right. That's why I'm here." Ethan stopped pacing, facing her fully. "I don't want to push you away. I want to try, really try, to make this work. But I need you to understand that I'm going to mess up. I'm going to get lost in work sometimes. I'm going to struggle with balance. And I need to know if you can handle that." Madison stood silent for a long moment, processing. This was the choice, wasn't it? She could walk away now, protect her heart, go back to her safe, lonely life. Or she could take a risk on a man who was flawed and scared, but trying. "I can handle it," she said finally. "But only if you're honest with me. Don't disappear and make excuses. Don't cancel without explanation. I need communication, Ethan. I need to know I matter. You matter." Ethan crossed the room in 3 strides, taking her face in his hands. "God, Madison, you matter more than anything. I'm just learning how to balance you with everything else." "Then learn faster," Madison said. But she was smiling now, her anger dissolving. "Because I'm not going to wait around forever. I don't want you to wait at all. I want you right here, with me, messy and complicated and real." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and Madison kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck. They stumbled toward the couch, never breaking contact, and for the next hour, nothing existed except them. Later, as they lay tangled together, Ethan's hand tracing lazy patterns on Madison's arm, he spoke softly. "I want to introduce you to my parents." Madison's eyes flew open. "What?" "I want them to meet you. I know it's soon, but I don't care about timelines anymore. You're important to me, and I want them to know that." Madison's heart swelled and sank simultaneously. Meeting the parents was a big step, maybe too big. But looking at Ethan's face, so open and hopeful, she couldn't say no. "Okay, when?" "Next Sunday. Family dinner at their estate." Ethan grimaced. "Fair warning, my father is difficult. My mother is lovely but overwhelmed by him. And the whole thing will probably be uncomfortable." "Selling it really well," Madison joked. "But yes, I'll go." "Thank you." Ethan pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I promise it'll be worth it." Madison hoped he was right. Sunday arrived too quickly. Madison spent the entire week anxious, changing her outfit multiple times, rehearsing conversation topics. When Ethan picked her up, she was wearing a simple black dress and heels, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. "You look perfect," Ethan said, squeezing her hand. "I look terrified." "Also perfect." The Sinclair estate was everything Madison expected, and more. a sprawling mansion set on acres of manicured grounds, with a circular driveway and actual columns at the entrance. Madison's stomach churned as they walked to the door. Ethan's mother answered the door herself, a surprise that immediately eased some of Madison's tension. Catherine Sinclair was elegant in an effortless way, her silver hair styled simply, her smile warm and genuine. "You must be Madison," she said, pulling Madison into an unexpected hug. "I'm so glad to finally meet you. Ethan has told me so much." "All good things, I hope," Madison said, returning the hug. "Mostly." Catherine winked, and Madison immediately liked her. "Come in, please. Dinner is almost ready." The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior, all dark wood and expensive art. But Catherine led them to a cozy sitting room where a fire crackled in the hearth. It felt homier than Madison had anticipated. Ethan's father stood when they entered. Richard Sinclair was tall and imposing, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that assessed Madison in seconds. His handshake was firm, businesslike. "Madison, Ethan tells me you run a graphic design studio." "Yes, sir. I work primarily with tech startups and small businesses." Madison kept her voice steady despite her nerves. "Competitive field. Are you profitable?" "Dad," Ethan said warningly. "It's a fair question," Richard countered. "I am," Madison answered. "Not wealthy by any means. But I make enough to support myself and grow the business." Richard nodded, neither impressed nor disappointed. "At least you're not living off Ethan's money." "Father." Ethan's voice hardened. "That's enough." Catherine swooped in, linking her arm through Madison's. "Let's leave the men to their posturing. I want to show you my garden before dinner." Outside, the garden was breathtaking even in the evening light. Roses climbed trellises, their scent heavy in the air. Catherine led Madison down a stone path, silent for a moment before speaking. "Please don't let Richard intimidate you. He does it to everyone, even me sometimes." "I appreciate the warning," Madison said with a small smile. "Ethan said he could be difficult." "Difficult is kind," Catherine laughed. "But he means well. He just wants to protect his sons, especially Ethan." "The company, the pressure. It's a lot for anyone. Richard worries. Does he worry that I'm a distraction?" The question was out before Madison could stop it. Catherine paused, turning to face Madison fully. "He worries that you might break Ethan's heart. My son has never brought anyone home before, Madison. In all his 32 years, you're the first woman he's wanted us to meet. That tells me everything I need to know about how he feels. The question is, how do you feel?" Madison swallowed hard. "I'm falling in love with him. It terrifies me, but it's true." "Good." Catherine's smile was brilliant. "Then we'll weather Richard together. Now come, let's eat before the roast dries out." Dinner was a careful dance of conversation. Richard asked pointed questions about Madison's business, her family, her future plans. Madison answered honestly, refusing to be cowed. Ethan sat beside her, his hand occasionally finding hers under the table in silent support. It was Catherine who shifted the conversation, asking about James and Jessica's recent honeymoon, and suddenly the table relaxed. Richard even laughed at one of Ethan's stories, the sound surprising them all. By the time dessert arrived, Madison felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd survived. After dinner, Richard pulled Ethan aside for a private conversation, leaving Madison with Catherine in the sitting room. "You did wonderfully," Catherine said, pouring tea. "Richard is already impressed, though he'd never admit it." "Really?" "Because he looked at me like I was a business proposal he was considering rejecting." Catherine laughed. "That's just his face, dear. Trust me, if he actually disapproved, you'd know." She handed Madison a delicate china cup. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." I worry about Ethan. He works too hard, carries too much weight. I see him burning himself out, and I can't stop it." Catherine's eyes glistened. "But since he met you, he's different. Lighter. He calls me more, smiles more. You've given him something I couldn't, balance." Madison's throat tightened. "I don't know if I can be that for him long term. His life is so different from mine." "Love isn't about matching lives, Madison. It's about building one together." Catherine reached over, squeezing Madison's hand. "If you love my son, don't let the differences scare you away. They can be your greatest strength." Before Madison could respond, Ethan and Richard returned. Ethan's expression was neutral, but Madison caught a flicker of tension in his jaw. "Ready to go?" he asked Madison. "If you are." They said their goodbyes, Catherine hugging Madison warmly and whispering, "Welcome to the family." In the car, Madison waited until they were on the main road before asking, "What did your father say?" Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "He asked if I was sure about you, if this was serious or just another phase." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Ethan glanced at her, his expression fierce. "I told him you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and if he can't see that, it's his loss, not mine." Madison's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Ethan." "I mean it, Madison. I know we haven't been together that long, but I don't need more time to know you're it for me." He pulled the car over abruptly, turning to face her. "I love you. I'm in love with you. And I needed you to hear that." "I love you too," Madison whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and right. "God help me. I love you so much it scares me." Ethan cupped her face, kissing her with such tenderness that Madison's heart ached. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, the air in the car electric. "Take me to the lake," Madison said suddenly. "Our lake. I want to be there with you." Ethan didn't need to be asked twice. He drove them out of the city, toward the place where they'd had their first date. The lake was quiet and dark when they arrived, the moon reflecting on its still surface. They sat on the dock, wrapped in each other's arms. And for the first time since they'd met, Madison let herself believe that this might actually work. The next few months were the happiest of Madison's life. She and Ethan fell into a rhythm, learning to balance their demanding careers with stolen moments together. Ethan started leaving work earlier when he could, and Madison learned to set boundaries with clients, protecting her personal time. They weren't perfect. There were still fights about missed calls and forgotten plans, moments when Madison's insecurity clashed with Ethan's intensity. But they worked through them, learning each other's languages, finding compromise. Madison's business flourished. Word had spread about her work, and she landed her biggest client yet, a growing tech company that wanted a complete rebrand. The project was enormous, career-defining, and terrifying. "I don't know if I can handle this alone," Madison confessed to Ethan one night, as they lay in his apartment, her head on his chest. "Then don't do it alone," Ethan said simply. "Hire help. You're always saying you want to expand. This is your chance. Hiring people means commitment. What if the work dries up? What if I can't pay them?" "What if you succeed beyond your wildest dreams?" Ethan countered. "Madison, you're brilliant at what you do. Stop being afraid of your own potential." His words gave her courage. Within a month, Madison hired 2 junior designers and moved her studio out of her apartment and into a small office space. It was terrifying and exhilarating, watching her dream expand beyond what she'd imagined. Ethan was there for every milestone, celebrating her wins and supporting her through the inevitable setbacks. In turn, Madison became Ethan's anchor during stressful periods. When a major deal fell through and Ethan came home devastated, Madison held him while he processed the failure. When his panic attacks intensified during a particularly brutal quarter, she learned the signs and helped him through them without judgment. They were building something real, something lasting. Or so Madison thought. The first crack appeared at a company party. Ethan had invited Madison to be his +1 at a tech industry gala, a glittering affair filled with the who's who of Silicon Valley. Madison wore a stunning red dress Ethan had bought her, though she'd protested the extravagance. "You'll outshine everyone there," he'd said when he picked her up, and the look in his eyes made her believe it. The gala was overwhelming. Madison recognized names and faces from business magazines, people whose net worth exceeded small countries' GDPs. She felt completely out of her depth. Ethan never left her side, introducing her proudly, his hand always on her lower back. But then someone pulled him aside for what was supposed to be a quick conversation, and Madison found herself alone. "So you're Ethan's girlfriend?" The voice came from behind her. Madison turned to find a stunning blonde woman in a silver dress, her smile sharp. "I am. Madison Cole." She extended her hand. The woman shook it limply. "Vanessa Price. Ethan and I dated a few years ago." Of course they had. Madison forced her smile to stay in place. "Nice to meet you." "Is it?" Vanessa's laugh was crystalline, cutting. "I'll be honest, I give it 6 months. Ethan gets bored easily. He likes the chase, the novelty. But once that wears off, he moves on." "I should know." "People change," Madison said evenly, though her stomach churned. "Do they?" "Because from where I'm standing, Ethan is the same man he always was. Brilliant, driven, and utterly incapable of putting a relationship before his company." Vanessa's eyes glittered with malice. "But good luck. Maybe you'll be different." She walked away, leaving Madison feeling sick. Was she right? Would Ethan eventually tire of her and move on? "There you are." Ethan appeared at her elbow, oblivious to Madison's turmoil. "Sorry, that took longer than expected. Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine, just tired." Madison forced a smile. "Can we leave soon?" "Of course. Let me say goodbye to a few people." The ride home was quiet. Ethan kept glancing at Madison, clearly sensing something was wrong, but she couldn't bring herself to tell him about Vanessa. It felt petty, insecure. But the woman's words had burrowed into Madison's mind like parasites. At Madison's apartment, Ethan walked her to the door. "Madison, what's really going on?" "Nothing. I'm just exhausted." "You're lying. I can always tell when you're lying." Ethan cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Talk to me." "I met your ex tonight. Vanessa." Madison said it flatly, without emotion. "She had some interesting things to say about your track record with relationships." Ethan's expression darkened. "What did she tell you?" "That you get bored? That you'll eventually choose your company over me?" Madison pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "Is she right?" "No." God, no. Ethan looked genuinely pained. "Vanessa and I were wrong for each other from the start. We dated for 3 months, and it was a disaster. She wanted someone to bankroll her lifestyle. I wanted someone who understood ambition. Neither of us got what we wanted." "But the part about choosing your company," Madison pressed. "Is that true?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and that silence told Madison everything she needed to know. "I won't lie to you," he said finally. "My company will always be important to me. I've built it from nothing. It's my legacy, my purpose. But that doesn't mean I'll choose it over you. It means I need to find a way to have both." "What if you can't?" Madison whispered. "What if one day you have to choose? Then I'll figure it out. Together. With you." Ethan stepped closer, his voice urgent. "Madison, I love you. I'm not going anywhere." "Vanessa is bitter and wrong." Don't let her poison what we have." Madison wanted to believe him, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew in the dark corners of her mind. Over the next weeks, Madison tried to ignore her doubts, but they kept surfacing. Every time Ethan canceled a plan or worked late, Vanessa's words echoed. "He'll choose his company over you." It didn't help that Ethan was legitimately swamped. His company was expanding into Asian markets, which meant late-night calls with international teams and frequent travel. Madison told herself to be understanding, supportive, but resentment built with each missed dinner, each postponed date. The breaking point came during Madison's biggest presentation. She was pitching her rebrand to her major client, a presentation she'd been preparing for months. Ethan had promised to be there, sitting in the back row for moral support. Madison had been nervous but excited, knowing he'd be watching. The presentation went brilliantly. Madison felt confident and articulate, her designs speaking for themselves. When the client's CEO stood and applauded, offering her a contract extension on the spot, Madison's heart soared. She looked to the back row, ready to share the moment with Ethan. The seat was empty. He hadn't come. Madison got through the rest of the meeting on autopilot, smiling and shaking hands while her chest hollowed out. By the time she reached her office, the congratulations from her employees felt meaningless. She checked her phone. One text from Ethan, sent an hour before the presentation. "Emergency board meeting. I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to you." Madison stared at the words until they blurred. She wanted to scream, to cry, to throw her phone across the room. Instead, she turned it off and went home. Fitzgerald greeted her at the door, and Madison collapsed on the couch, finally letting the tears come. She cried for the disappointment, for the broken promise, for the growing realization that maybe Vanessa had been right. Around 8, someone knocked on her door. Madison ignored it. The knocking persisted, followed by Ethan's voice. "Madison, I know you're in there. Please, let me in." She considered refusing, but the fight had gone out of her. She opened the door. Ethan stood there with flowers and a face full of regret. "I'm so sorry," he began, but Madison cut him off. "You promised. You said you'd be there, and you weren't." "I know. The meeting was unavoidable. There's a hostile takeover attempt, and if I don't act fast, I could lose the company." "There's always something, Ethan." Madison's voice was flat, exhausted. "There's always a crisis or a meeting or an emergency. I can't compete with your company, and I'm tired of trying." "You're not competing. Madison, please." "I need space." The words came out before Madison fully realized she meant them. "I need to think about whether this is actually working or if we're just fooling ourselves." Ethan's face went pale. "You're breaking up with me." "I'm asking for time apart, just a few days to clear my head." Madison's tears returned, hot and bitter. "I love you, Ethan, but I can't keep feeling like I'm second place in your life." "You're not second place. You're everything." "Then why do I feel so alone?" Madison whispered. Ethan had no answer to that. He set the flowers down gently, his movements slow and defeated. "If you need space, I'll give it to you. But Madison, this isn't over. I won't let it be." He left, and Madison closed the door, sliding down to the floor. Fitzgerald padded over, curling up in her lap, and Madison buried her face in his fur. "What have I done?" she whispered. The next few days were agony. Madison threw herself into work, but everything reminded her of Ethan, her office, which he'd helped her find, the coffee shop where they'd had their first morning date. Even Fitzgerald seemed to judge her, meowing mournfully as if asking where Ethan had gone. On the 4th day, Jessica called. "Madison, what the hell is going on? Ethan showed up at our house looking like death, and he won't tell us anything except that you needed space." "We're taking a break," Madison said tiredly. Jess, I don't want to talk about it. Well, too bad. Because I'm coming over. Jessica hung up before Madison could protest. 20 minutes later, she arrived with wine and determination. Talk, she commanded, pouring 2 generous glasses. Madison did. She told Jessica everything, from Vanessa's poisonous words to the missed presentation to her growing fear that this relationship was doomed. Jessica listened without interruption, then set down her glass with a decisive clink. Madison, do you love him? Yes, but no buts. Do you love him? And does he love you? I think so. Yes. Then you're being an idiot. Jessica's bluntness made Madison blink. Ethan is not perfect. He works too much. He gets lost in his responsibilities. And yes, sometimes he disappoints people. But Madison, he adores you. I've never seen my brother-in-law look at anyone the way he looks at you. But what if it's not enough? Madison whispered. What if love isn't enough to bridge the gap between our lives? Then you make it enough. Jessica leaned forward, her expression intense. Relationships aren't about finding someone perfect. They're about finding someone worth fighting for. Is Ethan worth fighting for? Madison thought about Ethan's laugh, the way he held her like she was precious, how he'd opened up about his fears and dreams. She thought about the lake and picnics and quiet mornings in bed. Yes, she said softly. He's worth it. Then stop hiding and tell him that. Because that man is probably drowning in self-blame right now, convinced he's lost the best thing in his life. Madison showed up at Ethan's apartment an hour later, her heart pounding. She'd rehearsed what to say a dozen times, but when he opened the door, every planned word fled. He looked awful. Unshaven, hair disheveled, wearing sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt. His eyes widened when he saw her. Madison, can I come in? He stepped aside wordlessly. His usually immaculate apartment was a mess. Takeout containers on the coffee table, papers scattered everywhere. I've been trying to figure out how to fix this, Ethan said, gesturing at the chaos. How to prove to you that you matter more than anything. But I keep coming up empty. Ethan, I know I messed up. I keep messing up. I missed your presentation, the biggest moment of your career, because I was dealing with corporate bullshit that probably won't matter in 5 years. But Madison, you'll matter in 5 years. You'll matter in 50 years. I just don't know how to balance everything, and I'm terrified that my incompetence is going to cost me you. Madison crossed the room, taking his face in her hands. Stop. Just stop talking and listen to me. Ethan nodded, his eyes locked on hers. I was wrong to ask for space. I was scared and hurt, and instead of talking to you, I ran. But these past few days without you have been hell. I don't want space, Ethan. I want you, messy and imperfect, and struggling to balance everything. Because I'm messy and imperfect, too. You're perfect to me, Ethan whispered. I'm really not. I'm insecure and stubborn, and I let my ex-girlfriend get in my head. But I love you, and I think we can make this work if we both try. Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly Madison could barely breathe. I'll try. God, Madison, I'll try every single day. I can't promise I'll never disappoint you again, but I promise I'll never stop choosing you. That's all I need, Madison said, and kissed him. They spent the rest of the night talking, really talking, about their fears and expectations. Ethan admitted he'd been using work as a shield, afraid to be vulnerable. Madison confessed that she'd been waiting for him to leave, convinced she wasn't enough for someone like him. You're more than enough, Ethan said fiercely. You're everything. They made plans. Ethan would delegate more at work, bringing in a COO to share the load. Madison would work on her insecurity, maybe even talk to a therapist. They would schedule regular date nights and protect that time fiercely. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be real. The next few months tested their resolve. There were stumbles, arguments about missed plans or misunderstood texts, but each time they came back to each other, talked it through, chose each other again. Madison's business continued to grow. She hired more staff, moved into a bigger office, started getting featured in design magazines. Ethan was there for every success, cheering louder than anyone. Ethan's company survived the takeover attempt and emerged stronger. He hired a brilliant COO who took over the day-to-day operations, freeing Ethan to focus on strategy and, more importantly, his life outside work. 6 months after their reconciliation, Ethan took Madison back to the lake. It was fall now, the trees ablaze with color, leaves drifting down to carpet the dock. They sat together, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunset paint the sky. "I have something to ask you," Ethan said, his voice nervous in a way Madison had never heard. "Okay." She turned to face him, her heart starting to race. Ethan pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Madison's breath stopped. "Madison Cole, you walked into my life at a wedding, looking lost and lonely, and you changed everything. You made me want more than just success. You made me want a life, a real life, with someone I love." He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. "I know I'm not perfect. I know I'll probably work too late sometimes and forget to text back. But I also know that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. So I'm asking, will you marry me?" Madison's vision blurred with tears. She thought about that first night. How she'd been so lonely and convinced she'd always be alone. She thought about Ethan's hand pulling her onto the dance floor, his whispered confession about panic attacks, the way he looked at her, like she hung the moon. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying simultaneously. "Yes, of course, yes." Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with such joy that Madison felt like she might float away. They stayed at the lake until stars filled the sky, making plans and dreaming about their future. When they finally drove back to the city, Madison's hand never left Ethan's, the ring glinting in the passing streetlights. "I can't wait to tell Jessica," Madison said. "She's going to lose her mind." "My mother already knows," Ethan admitted sheepishly. "I asked for her blessing last week." "Of course you did," Madison laughed. "Always thorough. When it comes to you, I don't take chances." They told their families the next day. Catherine cried and pulled Madison into a tight hug, whispering, "Welcome to the family, officially." Even Richard smiled, clapping Ethan on the back and telling Madison, "You've made him better. That's all a father can ask for." Jessica screamed and demanded to be the maid of honor immediately, and James hugged his brother, saying quietly, "About time." The engagement period was a whirlwind. Madison and Ethan planned a wedding that reflected both of them, elegant but not ostentatious, at a beautiful garden venue. Madison designed all the invitations and programs herself, while Ethan handled logistics with the efficiency of a CEO. There were disagreements, of course. Madison wanted a small, intimate ceremony. Ethan's business obligations required a larger guest list. They compromised, keeping the ceremony small, but the reception bigger. Madison wanted wildflowers. Ethan's mother lobbied for roses. They chose both. Through it all, they remembered what mattered, not the perfect wedding, but the marriage they were building. The wedding day arrived in a blur of nervous excitement. Madison stood in the bridal suite, her hands shaking as Jessica helped her into the dress. It was ivory lace with a flowing train, elegant and simple, exactly what Madison had wanted. "You look like a princess," Jessica said, her eyes misting. "A really anxious princess who might throw up," Madison replied, trying to breathe. That's normal. I threw up twice before my wedding. Jessica laughed, adjusting Madison's veil. But the moment you see him at the altar, all the nerves disappear. Trust me. There was a knock at the door, and Catherine entered, holding a small box. I have something for you, dear. Something borrowed. She opened the box to reveal a delicate pearl bracelet. This was my grandmother's. She wore it at her wedding, and I wore it at mine. I'd be honored if you wore it today. Madison's eyes filled with tears as Catherine fastened the bracelet around her wrist. Thank you for everything, for welcoming me into your family. Thank you for loving my son the way he deserves to be loved, Catherine replied, kissing Madison's cheek. Music drifted through the window, signaling it was time. Madison's mother appeared, looking elegant in a soft blue dress, her eyes shining with pride. Ready, sweetheart? Madison took a deep breath, looking at herself in the mirror. She thought about the lonely girl who'd sat at a wedding table 6 months ago, convinced she'd always be alone. That girl seemed like a stranger now. I'm ready. The garden ceremony site was breathtaking. White chairs lined an aisle scattered with rose petals, trees strung with fairy lights, even though it was still afternoon. At the end of the aisle stood Ethan, looking devastating in his tuxedo, and when his eyes found Madison, his entire face transformed. Jessica was right. The moment Madison saw Ethan, every nerve, every doubt vanished. There was only him, waiting for her, looking at her like she was his entire world. Madison walked down the aisle on her mother's arm, her heart so full she thought it might burst. When she reached Ethan, he took her hand, his eyes glistening. You're so beautiful, he whispered. You're not so bad yourself, Madison whispered back, making him laugh. The ceremony was simple and perfect. They'd written their own vows, wanting words that felt real, not rehearsed. Ethan went first, his voice strong and clear. Madison, when I met you, I was successful but empty. I'd convinced myself that work was enough, that I didn't need anyone. Then you walked into my life and showed me what I was missing. You made me want to be better, not just professionally, but as a person. You challenged me, supported me, loved me even when I didn't deserve it. I promised to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. I promised to choose you every single day, in every decision. And I promise that our love will always come before everything else. Madison's hands trembled as she began her vows. Ethan, I came to a wedding alone, convinced that love wasn't for me, that I was better off on my own. You proved me wrong in the best possible way. You saw through all my defenses and loved me anyway. You made me believe that I could be successful and still have love, that I didn't have to choose between my dreams and my heart. I promise to be your partner in everything. I promise to call you out when you work too late and to remind you that life exists outside boardrooms. And I promise to love you through every success, every failure, every panic attack, and every moment in between. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and when Ethan kissed Madison, it felt like coming home. The reception was a perfect blend of elegance and joy. They danced their first dance to the same song that had played at Jessica's wedding, the night they'd met. Madison rested her head on Ethan's chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. I can't believe you're my wife, Ethan murmured against her hair. Better believe it, Sinclair. You're stuck with me now. Best decision I ever made. As the night wore on, Madison looked around at the faces of the people she loved. Her mother, sober and happy, dancing with Catherine. Jessica and James, laughing with friends. Richard even smiling as he chatted with Madison's uncle. And Ethan, always Ethan, at her side, his hand in hers. Happy? Ethan asked, pulling her close. Incredibly, Madison replied. You? More than I ever thought possible. He kissed her forehead. Ready to start our life together? I've been ready since the moment you asked me to dance. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy. A dream Madison had mentioned once in passing that Ethan had remembered. They explored Florence and Rome, ate obscene amounts of pasta and gelato, and spent lazy afternoons in bed, learning each other all over again. On their last night, sitting on a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean, Ethan pulled Madison into his lap. I have a confession, he said. Oh no. You're secretly terrible with money and we're bankrupt, Madison teased. Worse, I planned our meeting. Madison sat up, confused. What? At the wedding. I saw you sitting alone, and I asked Jessica who you were. She told me all about you, how talented and smart and wonderful you were. So I asked her to seat me nearby. Ethan looked almost embarrassed. The whole pretend you're with me thing was planned. I wanted an excuse to talk to you. Madison stared at him, then burst out laughing. You manipulative CEO. And here I thought it was fate. It was fate. I just helped it along. Ethan grinned. Are you mad? I should be, but honestly, I'm impressed. Madison kissed him. You went to a lot of trouble for a woman you didn't know. I knew enough, and I knew I had to meet you. He grew serious. Best decision I ever made, even before asking you to marry me. They returned home to their new life. They'd bought a house together, a compromise between Madison's desire for something cozy and Ethan's need for space. It had a garden where Madison planted wildflowers and a home office where Ethan could work without disappearing into corporate headquarters. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Madison's business continued to thrive, and she started teaching design workshops on weekends, sharing her knowledge with aspiring designers. Ethan scaled back his hours, finally trusting his team to handle the day-to-day operations. They had dinner together most nights, talked about their days, made love, and fought, and laughed, and built a life. On their first anniversary, Ethan took Madison back to the lake. It had become their tradition, returning to the place where everything started. I have a surprise, Madison said as they sat on the dock, watching the sunset. Yeah? Ethan pulled her against his chest. What's that? Madison placed his hand on her still flat stomach, her heart racing. We're going to need to add another room to the house. Ethan went very still. Madison, are you saying? I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. She turned to see his face, anxious about his reaction. Ethan's eyes were wide, his expression cycling through shock, joy, fear, and wonder. Then he laughed, a sound of pure happiness, and kissed her with such tenderness that Madison's eyes filled with tears. We're having a baby, he said, his voice full of awe. We're having a baby, Madison confirmed. They sat there as the sun set, talking about nurseries and names and the future they were building. Madison thought about that lonely girl at the wedding, the one who'd given up on love. She wanted to tell that girl that everything would be okay, that the man who asked her to dance would become her entire world. She wanted to tell her that sometimes the best things in life happen when you least expect them, when you're sitting alone at a wedding, convinced you'll always be lonely. And then a stranger sits down and whispers, "Pretend you're with me," and everything changes. Ethan's hand rested on Madison's stomach, protective and gentle. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For taking a chance on me, for loving me, for giving me everything I didn't know I needed." Madison laced her fingers through his. "Thank you for seeing me that night, for not walking past my table, for asking me to dance. I'd ask you to dance every day for the rest of my life if I could." then I'd say yes every single time. They stayed at the lake until the stars came out, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their engagement, and now the promise of their growing family. Madison rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, feeling completely, perfectly at peace. This was her life now. Not the lonely existence she'd resigned herself to, but something full and rich and real, a husband who loved her fiercely, a baby on the way, a career she was proud of, and a future that stretched out bright and promising. It had all started with a drunk girl at a wedding who'd had one too many glasses of champagne, and a billionaire who'd been hiding from his brother's happiness. Except Madison hadn't been drunk, and Ethan hadn't been hiding. They'd both been looking for something they couldn't name, and somehow, impossibly, they'd found it in each other. As they drove home that night, Madison looked at her husband and smiled. "I love you, Ethan Sinclair." "I love you too, Madison Sinclair," he replied, bringing her hand to his lips. "Forever." "Forever," Madison agreed, and she knew with absolute certainty that she meant it. What did you think of their story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what's your rating? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories, and check out more emotional stories by clicking on the end screen.